It's great to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Great timing with the Chinese New Year holiday, so that I could make it. Happy New Year of the Pig. So I've got 15 minutes to tell you about the world's most exciting luxury market. Just to rewind a little bit. So I'm actually from Luxembourg and the UK, but I've lived in China for 25 years. So some people say I'm more Chinese than anything else. But I read and write Chinese, and 9 years ago I set up this agency called Reuter Communications. Unfortunately, before you ask, no connection to Reuters. We're the different Reuter, we're the other one. And what we do is we work with some of the world's most celebrated brands, helping them to understand and navigate and be successful in China. So without further ado, today I'm going to share 5 quick things that you need to know about China in 2019. I think that there's been a lot of negative press, especially from where I sit. I'm based in Shanghai. Every time I look at the FT or the New York Times or The Economist, there's usually a scary headline talking about a hard landing, talking about, the end of this amazing growth. And of course, there's been an adjustment. I think that, when we look at the pace and the speed of growth in the economy, there is an adjustment. There's also, a lot of worries in China about the trade war. There's worries about a potential housing bubble. We've had recently Apple talking about a slowdown in sales. I like to think it's actually because Xiaomi and some of the Chinese mobile phone operators are absolutely brilliant and way cheaper than Apple, so why would people buy Apple? But where we do see a huge opportunity and a lot of excitement and promise is luxury. So if you look at 2018, we had 32% of luxury spend globally was done by the Chinese. And according to Bain, that number goes up to 45% in 2025. So great reasons to be very positive about luxury in China. Same with Chinese billionaires. When you look at how much their wealth is increasing year on year, it's really significant. And I think, living in China, I see continued optimism and appetite and interest and curiosity for luxury in the way that people are consuming it, in the way that people are traveling. There's so many interesting things happening in the world of luxury. We can't talk about China without talking about the Chinese travelers. For a lot of you, you might have businesses based here. You might not even be in China, but it's so important to be talking to those Chinese travelers. It sounds obvious, but so much of the research they do before they leave China about where they're going, what they'll be buying, what experiences they'll be enjoying, they do that in China, and they are incredibly well researched. So when I hear people in London or Paris saying to me, wow, there's so many Chinese, I say to them, you've seen nothing yet. 6% of Chinese people today have a passport. That number goes up to 10% by 2020. So just imagine how many more Chinese travelers there will be in Paris and London and all over. So it's a huge opportunity. So for any business, even if you're not in China, China needs to be in your business strategy. Just as an interesting fact, 15 years ago, there were no ski resorts in China. And with the Winter Olympics coming up, Club Med now estimates that by 2025, China will be the 4th largest ski market. Can you imagine? 20 years ago, no one was skiing, and today it's a huge, huge market. So 5 quick things I'll tell you about in the next 10 minutes. We'll just touch on, what is luxury today in China. WeChat, hopefully everyone's heard of WeChat. Hopefully you might even be on it. But today there's a lot more. There are a lot more platforms than WeChat, so we want to delve into that. Niche luxury is huge, not just in fashion, but in travel, in wellness, in all sorts of different areas, and it's really an exciting area. Working with influencers, and lastly, how can you connect in a smarter way? So What is luxury today in China? I think luxury is different for everyone, but I like to think back that when I was at university in Beijing in the early 90s, I would come to Europe on holiday, and people would always ask me to buy them perfume. You know, French perfume was really seen as a real luxury item. And it's funny to think that today, I mean, no one ever asked me to buy French perfume. I think they can buy it anywhere in China, and everyone's traveling. So, what does luxury mean to people in China today? We did a report late last year with ILTM, the International Luxury Travel Mart, and we surveyed 400 families, so affluent families, to really understand how they make their travel choices and, what's important to them when they travel as families. And of course, in being environmentally friendly and sustainability are not new concepts per se, but in China they are new concepts. 5 years ago, you would never have had 71% of people surveyed saying that sustainability is really important when they choose a hotel. So there are these real shifts when it comes to what people are looking for when they go abroad or on holiday, even in China. Everyone talks about experiences, so I won't bang on about it, but experiences are key. And what these families are looking for is, wellness, and the more important thing, when they're traveling with their children, is even organic food in the kids club, which was a big surprise to all of us. So you've all heard about the little emperors. So the little emperors it was this term coined to sort of define children who were born under the one-child policy. So if you imagine one child with, parents and then sets of grandparents and great-grandparents, so a lot of attention going on, this child and making sure that they are given every opportunity possible. Today, we really have the luxury little emperors. If you look at Dior, so their best performing store globally is in Chengdu, in Sichuan province, Baby Dior. So it just goes to show you that at the top level of luxury in China, people are spending so much on clothes, on education, anything to improve the lives of their child and give them a better chance at success. It's incredibly competitive. You have 7.5 million university graduates every year finishing university in China and looking for jobs. So, when you look at how they travel, they're looking for experiences, again, for the child, cultural experiences, Chinese-speaking staff, and, being engaged, being kept busy. Just finally on this point, organic came across as something really important. Again, completely new. 5 years ago, we would never have seen such an emphasis on organic. I think if you look at some of the things that have been happening in China, environmental issues, air pollution, food scandals, vaccine scandals, all sorts of things. People are really conscious about what they're eating, what they're putting into their bodies, and how they're living. So organic, even across beauty, is really, really important. So, second point. I hope everyone's heard of WeChat. WeChat is really how we live our lives in China. Actually, even if you walk down the streets in Shanghai or Beijing and you happen to see a beggar, the beggar will not have a pot to collect coins because we live in a completely cashless world. They will have a QR code, and hopefully someone will scan it and send them money onto their device. I can't over-exaggerate how fast China is moving when it comes to mobile. It is incredibly exciting, and it is, I think, years ahead from anywhere else in the world. So it's not just about WeChat, although WeChat is really the one app that you need, and you can live your whole life by. You can pay your bills, book your flights, book your hotels, communicate with your friends, do whatever you want to do. But today, there are a number of other apps that we want to tell you about. For example, in the travel sector, Fliggy is an app that not so many people are aware of outside of China, but Fliggy is incredibly powerful and important for Chinese travelers. So the way that they do their research, the way that they make up their minds about going to off the beaten track destinations, they will be on Fliggy. If you look at that, Fliggy's the one at the top, and then after that, of course, they'll be looking for your brand WeChat account, your official account on WeChat, or maybe on Ctrip, which is a huge travel operator. People come to me, and sometimes they want to spend an awful lot of money developing a Chinese website. I would say that's a waste of money because really no one's browsing websites anymore. And when you look at search engine optimization, you don't do it, on websites anymore. You do it in apps like Little Red Book. Couple of key platforms to know about. This one was specifically when we looked at what motivates Chinese families and how they travel. But Fliggy, again, 29% on the top left, really a big one. Ctrip, WeChat, and then a couple of others like TikTok, which is a short video sharing platform. So for anyone who has a brand with product, maybe beauty or fashion, you've probably heard of Little Red Book, Xiaohongshu. So Little Red Book has about 100 million very active users. And essentially, it allows anyone to become an influencer by posting content about brands and also linking to e-commerce. So it's a very China-specific app, and it's really taken retail by storm. And if you look at big luxury brands on the left here, we surveyed some influencers, and the influencers, the biggest influencers, are talking about Chanel, Hermes, and Gucci for a huge proportion of their time. So there's a lot of endorsement going on from the big brands, paying the influencers to talk about them on Little Red Book. This is an overview of Little Red Book. So this is a brand called Delvaux, which is a Belgian beautiful leather luxury brand. And so you've got a lady posting about her bag, and then it's linking into e-commerce or m-commerce. Here's another campaign, for example, from Louis Vuitton, where you might have to watch an advert and then you can purchase something which is just for a certain amount of time. Everyone loves exclusives. We talked about that word a little earlier, but in China, if there's a short time span to buy something exclusive, you're probably going to win on that one. It's always a good one. So here you've got another platform which is really important, where recently luxury brands have started playing around with it. It's called Douyin. Outside of China, people refer to it as TikTok. I'm not quite sure why, but it's short videos. And so brands here, you've got the Fendis, the Chanels. Everyone's trying it out to see where they're going to, where they're going to get to. Here you've got a lot of beauty brands. This is Dior, but beautiful films that are usually about 8 seconds long, and then you can link to more information about the product. So, I'm almost running out of time, so sorry, I'll speed up. Niche luxury, a real passion of mine. I think that having been in China for such a long time and having seen the evolution of the Chinese consumers, it's fascinating that today you'll have consumers wearing Gucci, and then they're twinning it with a really cool Chinese designer. They're traveling to incredibly original places, so they're not choosing to do the big cities in a short space of time. They're going to Mykonos or Ibiza, or they're going skiing, and how they buy beauty, even the rise of niche beauty. For example, Space NK is doing incredibly well in China with so many niche brands, and people are really interested in these new niche brands, especially when they're organic. And JNBY, a very cool Chinese brand that also has kids wear, that was founded in Hangzhou, that's doing very well. So it's really interesting to see the sophistication in the market, and I think there's also real pride in China. about how China's doing and how far China has developed in such a short time. And it's absolutely normal that people are interested in great Chinese brands as well. And I think we'll continue to see that, not just in fashion, but in hospitality, in beauty. There's so many interesting brands coming up. So, quick one on influencers. I think that all of you will probably have heard about influencers, or KOLs, as we call them in China. KOL stands for Key Opinion Leader. I think that we're seeing a real shift here. I think that there's a lot of KOL fatigue. Brands have paid so much money to KOLs, and it's not always clear how the content is driving the commerce. And so where we like to come in is working with LOLs. These are local opinion leaders. But I think that when you see so many KOLs endorsing so many different brands, it is incredible. And I think that we have such a sophisticated digital native who's on all these platforms seeing all these KOLs all the time. We find that working with these LOLs actually resonates very well. A couple of examples. So Swire Hotels, which is a Hong Kong group that has beautiful boutique hotels like Upper House and Middle House. They did a wonderful campaign launching a new property, and instead of using big KOLs who were paid, we found really interesting LOLs. These were local tastemakers who were, we had a Peking opera singer, we had a Chinese fashion designer, but it really gave the campaign a lot more depth. And I think that it also attracted, people from different sectors who might not normally, be watching the big KOLs, but people with a lot more depth, maybe. The Swiss tourism actually worked with a gardening KOL, which was really fascinating, on a great campaign about their gardens. And then Space NK does lots of smaller events working with local tastemakers. So it could be photographers, it could be designers. These are people who are very well respected in their own field and industry, and who are not, pure pay-for-play influencers. This is an example of the one I just mentioned with Swire Hotels. So this was working with Wang Peiyu, a Peking opera singer. And I think it also positions the brand in a much more intellectual way when it came to the sort of the brand lovers. Quickly on the last point, I always laugh because I think about 6 months ago, one of the brands we were working for was doing a big VIP event in Shanghai, and they sent out the invitation to all of their VICs. Who they believed they had a great rapport with. And so they emailed this invitation out, and they didn't get any responses. Email doesn't work in China. People do not use email. So forget about a CRM system based on email. It has to be on WeChat. WeChat's an incredible platform when used well for CRM, because you can track from the back end who's liking your post, who's reposting, who's got the most engagement on your behalf. And then you can look at, how do you actually turn these people into your brand advocates. And there's so many different ways of doing that. Maybe it's, giving them special experiences, building a sort of community with the biggest brand lovers. But even when people are traveling, I'm always surprised that hotels are not doing more of what could be so simple as using WeChat well. Even if you're a little hotel in the countryside in England, you could have a WeChat account where you can even have your menus in Chinese. And so when people arrive, they can just follow your official WeChat. And you have so many little mechanics in WeChat that afford great flexibility for businesses. So just 3 things that I hope you take away from this very, very quick presentation. First one is just be digital everywhere. Last year we surveyed a lot of Chinese Gen Z millennials, and not one had bought a print magazine in the last 12 months. Now, that doesn't mean they're not reading news. It just means that the platform is completely different. So every magazine you can think of has their own WeChat official channel. So that is where people are reading the magazine. But it really is a completely digital world. And when I come to Europe, it's fascinating how far apart these worlds are in terms of how much usage there is in China when it comes to digital. Be Chinese. This sounds obvious, but I think to know China and to succeed in China, you have to come to China or be in China. China changes so fast. So make sure you're regularly coming if China is going to be a big part of your business or future business, and don't just go to Shanghai or Beijing. Go and see lots of really exciting markets like Chongqing and Taiyuan and Chengdu and lots of other amazingly huge cities that often don't get talked about so much, but where there's huge opportunity. And I think that the last one to leave you with is, how can you, when you're communicating with people in China, and then when they come and visit you maybe in London, how can you make that experience seamless? Because if they know about you and if you're on their sort of agenda when they're coming, how can you make sure that it's a great experience? And a lot of that is looking at the tools like the WeChat, the obvious things like having someone who might, who can speak Chinese in store. But I think it's really looking at, if you present a great brand image online when they're in China, they're expecting that great image when they come into store. So making sure that it's really seamless and integrated. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. A terrific quick 15 minutes on China.